Good morning, Louise. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm in the company of Louise Mazanti, who is a psychotherapist, a teacher who trains professionals. She works with individuals and couples around sex, intimacy, and relationships. Thank you for joining me today, Louise.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So today we've agreed, given that we both work with many couples, to discuss some trends we observed, some of our reactions around these trends, what makes us passionate, how we can contribute to enhance the lives of our clients. And we will draw from our observation of society and perhaps the last few generations, our parents, our grandparents, whichever parts of society we feel we have an understanding of, specifically about the relationship between men and women in relationships. How much does society and trends within society influence people?
That's a good question. I think we have two parallels. I think on the one hand, the difficulties that men and women are experiencing in relationship are the same. There's a parallel that's always been there. And there's also another track where, because societal values are changing, that also impacts the existing difficulties between couples. So I see the same, but in a new way. And if I was to explain that, what I see is that men and women have a profound difficulty in actually understanding each other. If we talk in a heteronormative way, men and women in a relationship, or masculine, feminine polarities in relationship, they have a difficulty in understanding each other. And that hasn't changed, because we're wired differently. We have different instincts, we have different bodily impulses, we have different nervous systems. We are wired in a different way, and that hasn't changed. But societal values have changed. So the things we are allowed to think about, the things we are allowed to feel, the things we are allowed to identify with, they have changed. And the way that I see that is that we still have difficulties in understanding each other. We are very quick in making assumptions based on how we function. And if I'm just going to stay with men and women, women think men are supposed to be like them, and men think that women are supposed to be like them in the way that we communicate without thinking about it. So there's a lot of misunderstandings and hurt and lack of appreciation. It's a general topic between couples that create distance. But what I see is changing as a trend in society is that men are actually getting more in touch with their vulnerability. And women do not yet, I feel in general, they're not able to see it and hold it and actually be gentle and caring when a man steps into his sensitivity and his vulnerability. And women are beginning to step up to their, you could call it empowerment in lack of a better word. Which means that men don't identify what's happening with this woman. Why is she angry all the time? Why are we bickering? Why are we fighting all the time? So we don't understand the changes that are going on. And I think what I see between couples in general is a lot of confusion about what is it to be a man, what is it to be a woman, what is it to be in relationship, and a lot of disconnect.
I do agree that the biology hasn't changed, and probably wouldn't change within the next few centuries. That these things change very, very, very slowly, but the certain trends have changed. Perhaps I feel the perception that women have of men and men have of women, that is quite symptomatic of the eras we live in. And I would say that my mother's perception of men, or that generation, or her mother's perception of men, was somewhat different than perhaps, and same thing for the perception of men about women. Like you're saying, is talking about empowerment. So, and the confusion. So, in this case, men's confusion around understanding women's empowerment, and women's confusion around understanding that men are taking their first steps into becoming better communicator, better listeners, because getting in touch with your vulnerability strikes me as a first step in that direction. The perception of the other sex has changed, and that keeps changing. Particularly if society changes fast, and it has over the last 50 to 100 years, hasn't it?
I think you're right, and the perception has changed, but we are also carrying over a huge, sad heritage of judgment and friction. We're still not in harmony between the sexes. We are beginning to see the differences, but we are not appreciating each other. I feel that that's a big missing. Like, women are beginning to appreciate themselves more, but it's not translating to also appreciating men. And it feels like the same. Men are getting more and more scared and intimidated by women, and actually not able to appreciate what they're bringing. So it's like we kind of crossed over. Like, before, men were in the patriarchal paradigm. That's, fortunately, it's changing now, but it's almost like we're tipping over. And now the women are taking over and overpowering men and their sensitivity, instead of both stepping down and appreciating each other. And I see that. I want to hear your experience of that, but I see that in couples work, that actually, someone can own there's something going on and the other can't hear and appreciate what it is.
Yes. I've been working with hundreds of couples, over 300, and particularly over the last, since the lockdown, since the pandemic, most of my clients have become couples. So I'm saying this just to say that the trends that I'm about to say are based on a large sample. So I find that most of the couples that get in touch with me, it is a woman. And I'm talking about heterosexual couples. I also work with gay couples and other. The trend is definitely is the woman that gets in touch with me. Is in most cases the woman that identifies and wants to work on a relationship, and the man doesn't necessarily see the things that she sees as problematic, as problems, which can make the issue even more upsetting, that he doesn't see that. And what I end up doing as a therapist is to train men in their listening skills. And this to me strikes me as the most pragmatical, useful things I can do. But if I reflect on it, it seems to be a request coming from her, and he's listening, taking on board, sees that there is apparently a crisis, doesn't necessarily agree or understand, but in many cases wants to do it. It's not easy for him to do it. So I see as women leading the process and sort of taking their man by his hand, sometimes more gently and sometimes less gently. And I feel that the couples that are able to successfully heal their problems are couples where the resentment hasn't, you were hinting on that earlier, hasn't reached a level where even if he steps up 5 levels in his empathy and listening, it's too late. By the time they come and see me, it's already too late, which is making me increasingly keen on really focusing on preparation for marriage courses or preparation for long-term relationship courses, because I feel like these things were not discussed in large part before, earlier rather than later. So in the very early stages of the relationships, and they were also not discussed as and when things arise.
But there's an important bit here that I would like to add, Francesco, because this is what I see as a female therapist, that I can definitely see the women, there's a huge cry to be heard, for the men to become present, listen to her, feel her, empathize, be there. But the very interesting thing that I've observed a lot of times is that when he tries to actually speak about his experience, maybe not in the very verbalized and emotionally in tuned way that he has, he doesn't have the same tools, but he's trying. And I see so often that she's absolutely not present herself to hear. So it's not just men have to step up. I feel it's a one-way request as I see it now. Women want men to be more present, but they're not prepared themselves to actually receive what he has to say, because he just communicates in a different way. So women think, if he doesn't communicate like me, if he's not like me, if he's not able to do the same, it's wrong. So I feel we end up on the women's premises, and that's not healthy. It's not going to create what we're looking for. And I think that's important to remember, to look at. Okay, he needs to grow, but she needs to grow too. It's 50%. It's not just, oh, women, we've done our work. Now men, you do your work. We haven't done our work either. And we don't understand men, and we are not able to hold their vulnerability. We reject it. We pretend we don't hear it.
How about we park this, because I think we're gonna keep referring to this. It seems to be very central in the discussion. So long-term relationships and marriages often imply children, having children. Unquestionable studies, huge number of them, showing that single parents households are not good in general for children, how they perform at school, and how they develop emotionally, and what kind of adults they become, the relationships they form with the other sex, with the opposite sex, if they are heterosexual, seem to be less healthy. So there is a freedom that women fought for millennia, I'm not sure, centuries. The freedom to dissolve a marriage or a relationship that it's not healthy, or that it's even abusive, versus the lack of freedom that a child has to have the best of futures. So I'm not sure. Well, I suppose it really depends on how unhealthy and abusive, and whether the relationship is fixable or not.
Yeah, because of course, as parents, what we have to look at first and foremost is, what are we role modeling to our children? Is it to put up with an unacceptable situation, and also put up with a situation that's unacceptable as a partner, but might also be unacceptable to the children? And then, of course, it's time to move on and role model to the children that, of course, you are in choice of staying in a situation or leaving when it's not serving you. So that's a very general point, but I think it's important to remember as a parent, when you're considering the status of your relationship, what are you role modeling to your children? Because children can have a very healthy upbringing by a single parent if it's a single parent that is not afraid of taking the consequences of making choices and is resourced enough. And I think when we talk about that, when we talk about should we stay or should we go, we have to look at resources. I think that's the biggest problem, that people that leave a relationship when they're under-resourced, that is absolutely gonna impact the children. Are they financially under-resourced? Are they socially under-resourced? And I think we forget the socially under-resourced, which is this a parent that has friends and family and a good network, connections, people in their lives that can hold now the little family unit, a single parent? Is there more structure to hold it? And I think that's the biggest problem in our society, is that we're very isolated as this nuclear family. And when the nuclear family falls apart, there isn't the wider family, there isn't the village. And I think that's where we become very, very vulnerable to sometimes staying in dysfunctional relationships.
Yes, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I'm thinking, shall we talk about those relationships that are salvageable, was the term, that can be saved? Or shall we talk, I think if it's possible, talk about those that should not be, those couples that should not stay together because they're abusive, unhealthy dynamics. And in that case, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to live a happy life for an adult. Anyhow, yes. Which one inspire more to talk about? The first or the second?
I would say let's talk about what can be saved.
Right, the ones that can be saved. So I think that's where I would refer back to what we said about society as well. The perception of women that men have, and the perception of men that women have. We talked about being on women's premises.
Yeah.
And I talked about the resentment sometimes there is so much resentment when a couple, often I would say at the time, perhaps the clients are not aware of that it's too late already when they come and see me. But this resentment, how much of that is picked up from society as well? So I would say that those relationships that could be saved is where there is stuff that one is projecting or introjecting.
There always is. I want to say it's a given. There always is. That's how we work. And I think, I mean, if you go teach couples before they make a commitment to marry, that's where you want to start, because I think we enter committed relationships with a lot of expectations that are naive and unrealistic and actually not mature in terms of what is a life partner, what is a committed journey. It's not just unicorns and butterflies and in loveness and passion and hot sex and all the good stuff that we also want. A committed relationship and a life journey contains it all. It contains the wholeness of our humanness, which is the good stuff and the bad stuff, the wonderful stuff and the painful stuff. And I think we have not been aware of, not paid attention, not taken on board that a life partner is a partner that walks with us in life as we explore our wholeness and they explore their wholeness. And that means when we come together and commit, our stuff will come up. Our unresolved childhood neurosis, pain, or trauma, wherever we are on the scale, it will come up. When we start committing, when we start attaching, all our attachment wounds will come up. And we don't know that. Usually people, we know it as therapists, but people out there don't know that at some point they will hit the wall in the relationship. They will get to a stalemate. They will get to, sex will stop working. They will start arguing. They will feel they're lacking passion. It will happen because our childhood wounds get evoked. And that's the point where we don't know, where we haven't learned that relationship and maintaining a long-term relationship is as much about exercising the willingness and the ability to be uncomfortable and to grow and to face our own insecurities, our own childhood wounding, our own stuff that's coming up, instead of projecting it onto the other. You're not making me happy. You're making me feel insecure. You're making me feel unattractive. All that stuff. And then we start having the arguments.
And that seems to lead to a lot of separations.
Yeah.
Being convinced that my misery is because of you.
Yeah.
And like we said before, sometimes it's correct, but sometimes there's not enough willingness to engage in a painful process.
Yes.
But I couldn't agree with you more that a preparation for marriage is badly needed these days. Traditionally, the church used to have that role. Now, in the West, at least, we live in a mostly secular society. People like yourself and myself, therapists, and other, comparable professionals are developing. But considering the amount of money, time, traumas couples that I work with have gone through, it would have made, I so often feel it would have made so much more sense if they engaged in a preparation for marriage earlier on. And preparing couples that it's a difficult ride, like you said, and even takes a village to raise a child, that it takes a village to be happy. I like to mention that when I prepare couples for a long-term relationship. Build your network, your community, move to the right area with friendly families, do your homework, keep in good terms with your in-laws if it's feasible, because otherwise we end up expecting that one person provides what in human history a village used to provide.
Yeah,
because that's where we spent most of our history.
Yeah.
And I believe we are wired that way. We are wired to live in a village of 300 people, where about 15 of them are significant people. But those 15 significant people, most of us in the West, we need to sort of work to keep that around us and in good shape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have such a deep need to be loved, to belong, to be appreciated in order to feel safe. And when we live in these little couple units and the nuclear family, that's very vulnerable, because our partner is not always going to be able to love us in the way that we particularly need. And then we start projecting, then we start blaming. You're getting it wrong. You're not making me feel good, where it's not really their responsibility. And we've lost that ability to seek, to have that living, breathing relationship with the whole environment, so we're not putting all the pressure on our partner. I think we have such huge expectations to relationship, what it's supposed to provide for us, that no wonder people are struggling, because a relationship with one other person can't provide that, because they have their own journey and their own needs to hold and take care of. So it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to hold a couple.
Takes a village to hold a couple. Does marriage still imply commitment, Louise?
Oh.
Or should it?
What do you mean with that question?
In fact, I think you've already answered when you said what's mostly needed these days is that recognition and ability to go through the difficulties and the uncomfortableness, however long it takes. So if marriage still implies commitment, then one should expect those difficult phases and do their part, take their own responsibilities.
I think we have moved from understanding what is commitment in marriage, very kind of traditionally. It's been understood as, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to go anywhere else. I'm not going to cheat on you. That's kind of commitment. I'm committing to being your partner. But we haven't yet actually discovered the importance of committing to growth, of committing to looking at the stuff as it's going to come up. But most importantly, look at our own stuff, our own growth, not just, yes, I'm committed to staying through the difficulties we might encounter, but that's still about what's wrong with the relationship, what's wrong with the other, instead of looking at, can I commit to my own growth? Can I commit to facing the things that are uncomfortable and staying in connection? And I think that's the most important commitment we should make. That should be right up there when we decide to marry or decide to enter a committed relationship. That commitment for self-inquiry, self-responsibility, self-knowledge, self-reflection. That's above all the ability to self-reflect in connection. That could save so many relationships before we get to the point of resentment and stalemate where people just can't come back. And it's not safe any longer to self-reflect and be vulnerable. We have to really start from the beginning, as this is one of the basic skills for couples to manage, to master.
I completely agree, Louise. Thank you. Shall we talk about old paradigms and new paradigms?
Yeah.
I know that you are more of an optimist than you are a pessimist, and I want to be inspired by that, because I have to say that the experience of working with mostly heterosexual couples, the relationship between men and women, I feel is reaching a historical lowest. So whenever I want to be positive about the future, I'm thinking, what are my models? So sometimes I look at the past for models. There are some current models of happy couples that I look at as well. But how can you be stable and happy? What makes you positive?
It's impossible not to be positive, I want to say, and I know this sounds funny, but that's how it is. I really believe that we evolve as humankind. We evolve, and we evolve in a cyclical way. We evolve through phases of evolution, and these phases, they run in cycles. And you know, I'm very inspired by spiral dynamics, if you're aware of it, but it's just how consciousness evolves. And it evolves within cycles, and for greater and greater amount of consciousness in the individual and in the collective, in society. And within the cyclical means that there are cycles that complete. So there are paradigms, ways of thinking, ways of living that go through a phase and then they expire, then they collapse, because they have to evolve into something new. We can't stay. The evolution is not linear. Evolution is cyclical, which means something has to come to life, and then it's going to die, and then it's going to come to life in a new way. And what I see right now is, you know, I always think of evolution as when something is collapsing, when something is painful, when something is coming into a place of a lot of friction, when the kind of the paradigm is shifting. It's because it's making way for something new. Something old is expiring and something new is evolving. And within that, and this is why it's important to make this point, that we evolve in a way that transcends the old paradigm, but also includes it. So it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. For example, now it's all about feminism and women's liberation, and the men, they can just, you know, go fuck themselves, sorry. But, you know, that's somehow, there's a tendency to be in that way of, now it's our agenda, now it's our turn. And that's not transcend and include. That's overpowering. That's not taking what we've learned, taking the best things from the existing paradigm, taking it with us as we grow.
What are they? You say existing. You haven't said past. Is there anything from previous generations, even previous civilizations, that our ancestors did right?
Absolutely, of course, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here if they didn't do exactly what they needed to do. And there's been so much understandable criticism and rage and a lot of getting rid of, working through the patriarchal paradigm. You know, that's the thing we talk about a lot. But there's been so much goodness that we needed in order to be stable and grounded enough to get to a next level. We cannot skip any levels. There wasn't any mistakes in the sense of we needed to go through these cycles. And what are we taking with us now? That's why I say, you know, if we take it to the micro level of what I see in couples is that women right now are actually not able to hear and appreciate what their men are saying. And that's throwing out the baby with the bathwater when we can't hear what the masculine is bringing, because the masculine is bringing a lot of, I mean, we get, it's a little bit black and white and stereotypical, but it's still also a very workable model that the masculine is bringing a stability and a holding and a structure that's very much needed in order for the new paradigm to actually evolve. We need ground to stand on. And what we are seeing now is a paradigm that's changing, but it needed to. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. We can't see exactly now what's going to emerge when you say something positive, because we see now the old paradigm is expiring and people are getting really frustrated with each other. But it is because it is expiring. We're beginning to see something new. We haven't seen it yet. This is an old paradigm that's expiring. That's what we're seeing, but it is only because something new is evolving. It's not the end. It's the beginning of something new. And I feel very positive and very excited about that. When at the micro level, women can begin to hear men, men can begin to hear women, and there is a possibility for a synthesis between the masculine and the feminine. That I'm very excited about, both in, you know, down at the ground for individual couples and collectively. What happens when we can both bring the gifts into a real, equal, calibrated synthesis? I think there's a great potential there.
What's alive for me is what we said before about the nuclear family and it takes a village to be happy. So I spent half of my life in Italy, where I'm from, which is a Catholic family oriented country, and the second half of my life in London, UK, which is a country where the individuals thrive. It doesn't mean the family don't, because they do as well. And I work with lots of Asian families as well. I lived in India and I lived in Japan. So a part of me appreciates what traditional society, like Asian societies, have kept, the large family, and of course the role of women in certain Asian families has not gone through the feminism era, but I can see some happiness that comes from the large family, and it takes good relationship with your in-laws, it takes good relationship with your relatives, it takes respect from the older generation to the young ones, not just the other way around. So when you said let's not throw the baby with the bathwater, the humility in the West, sometimes I feel like there is a self-righteousness to think, oh, the West is leading the process of the new paradigm. Whatever the new paradigm is going to be, the West is leading it. And yeah, I'm just not sure. I like to keep an open mind about it. I see lots of positive things from London couples or American couples, Australian couples, and I see lots of positive things from marriages from more sort of traditional families, and by working with them. I don't know if you wanted to make any comments on what new paradigms and what they would be about, these new paradigms.
I think, first of all, I want to say, I think it's important to look at the individual couple and the context in which they live. The culture and the societal environment, the family, and the values that are there. And values, you know, we live in multiple paradigms at the same time. So it's not just one paradigm, but of course we are at the edge when we are having a conversation about what's happening between couples today. Why is there so much divorce and so much conflict? So that's the edge of the paradigm that's beginning to expire, but that doesn't mean that other people don't live very well and very happily in other paradigms. They exist at the same time. And I think we have to be careful not to impose our own judgment about where people should be and how they should be living, because it's important that everyone has to go through their development. At some point they might feel like this is not working for me anymore, then a change will start to happen. But as long as it is working, it is working, and it's not up to us to have an opinion about what is working for people. That need for change absolutely has to come from inside.
Right. Yeah, I suppose where I was going with that is not so much the media perception or what is more desirable, whether a Western lifestyle or a Western type of relationship or not, but more like what can we learn? What can different cultures learn from each other? What is a certain culture doing right?
Yeah.
So traditionally, the village meant, in a large part, family members, but also village members. These days, are we sure that village can be replicated entirely by friends, acquaintances, and neighbors? And if so, how can we work together with urban planners to make that happen better? Because the average person in London doesn't think they know their neighbors very well, or they are particularly in very good terms with them. And I find that London families who have children in friendly neighborhoods seem to be very, very happy.
Yeah. I think that makes me think about what's wrong with the paradigm that we live in. I mean, here in London, and it's like we live with a lot of individuation. We live in it's my life path, it's my career, it's about me. That's very much how our society.
My diary.
Sorry?
My diary.
Yes. Yeah. And we forget that it's not about me. And that's what we can learn from cultures that have, less individuation. You could say, in one way, you would say they're less evolved, but they're evolved on different qualities that are less egoic. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. We think it's all about me and my egoic life goals and potential and all that I have to evolve and express and experience. And we forget that it's not about me. It's about us. And it's not just us in the couple. It's us in the family. It's us in the friends. It's us in the neighborhood. It's us in connection. And that we tend to forget. It's about me and my satisfaction in my marriage. Did I choose the right partner for me? Instead of thinking, what can I do? What can I offer? What can I grow? What can grow from the love that's coming out of me? Not like, what can I get? And I think we got it the wrong way in our Western society at large.
And I was also thinking, the more I think about trends, and the more of a tendency perhaps I have to become slightly less enthusiastic than I normally am with couples. When I'm with couples, I'm very present, and like I said, often I'm just very pragmatical, and I see that if communication is the problem, and often it is, and once that improves, then intimacy improves, quality time improves, trust improves, and I can see that week by week, month by month, things often improve. So I experience myself as an optimist, but I was realizing in this interview, why am I feeling less positive when I reflect on society's trends? Because in a way, it's kind of overwhelming to think about the trends of society. We can only change our life or our family life. Society is something that we've inherited when we were born. We were born in a post-feminist era. I was born in the West, and there are so many limitations that history imposes. So when I look at history and society, it can be quite overwhelming. So I needed to take a breather now.
Yeah. And with that, what you're saying, Francesco, I totally agree that, you know, we look out and we think, oh my goodness, where should I position myself? Where are we headed? It's overwhelming and confusing. I absolutely agree to that. It's overwhelming to know what's my work as a man, what's my work as a woman, where we headed as society. But within that, I want to say, I just really trust that we are exploring the edges all the time. And sometimes, you know, we're going to fall over the edge and realize this didn't work collectively or individually, but we're still evolving and learning from, I fell over the edge, that really hurt, that wasn't the right way, and coming back. That's what we do as society as well. We you know, we evolve as a pulse. And sometimes we're going to be in a phase, you know, life, death, life cycle. It's cyclical, and sometimes something is going to end because it didn't work, and something new is going to come from that. And I absolutely believe in that also as a society, as we explore, you know, different ways of having relationships and polyamorous relationships and many different sexual and gender identities, you know, everything in a way is up for grabs. And I think that's very, very healthy at the same time, and it's very confusing. But I trust that from exploring those edges, the new is going to come, also from within, also from, you know, as I said, transcend and include. We're going to include some of the values that we have already, and it will hurt to evolve them, but they will evolve. That's what we're seeing. And that's why I'm so positive, because they are. We're just testing out, and we will find a way.
Louise, we touched at least 4 or 5 very profound areas, and I find myself in a position where all of them need more exploration, and at the same time, perhaps that would be for another time, because we want to keep it fresh and alive.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but I want to thank you for joining me in this discussion. We were not really prepared.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe what I want to say, Francesco, is that I very much appreciate, as a woman and as a female therapist, to have a conversation with a man that's also holding space for people and exploring, you know, because this means that we don't know the answer. You and I don't know the answer either, but we are exploring. And what we can do, and maybe that would be the point that I really want to make, is it's so important that we start listening to each other and appreciating each other. And that has gone lost. Women appreciating men and men appreciating women. So we don't know how to do that anymore. And I think that's our most powerful tool, both when I work with couples, so at the microcosm, but also at the macrocosm collectively. We have to change our thinking about each other.
Giving each other the benefit of the doubt.
See what happens. Yeah.
I feel like today we were in agreement that women are sort of leading this process and men are following the process, and it's needed. It's part of this historical change since the 60s. So it's up to women and men to communicate and be compassionate with each other.
Yes.
So it's absolutely fine for women to lead and for men to follow, particularly with regards to communication. Men continue to need to step up. But yeah, it doesn't happen overnight.
And it doesn't mean that women have the answer either. I want to say we need each other. So yes, men need to step up, but women also sometimes need to step down so that we can meet each other as equals.
I hope that we can come together to explore more deeply some of the topics that we discussed today. That would be good.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Louise. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.